Hello and welcome to the Beau podcast. Here we take a slightly unprofessional and certainly unconventional approach to the otherwise serious outdoor podcasting world. We cover a wide variety of outdoors related topics including big game hunting, bird hunting, fishing, gear and gear reviews, and even hot or controversial topics in the outdoor news world. Our goal is to provide you, the listener, with entertainment as well as educate you on different facets of the outdoor world. We hope to provide information that is able to help you improve yourself as an outdoors man or outdoors woman and help you hone the skills you already possess. So whether you're a veteran outdoorsman or you're brand new to the game, we want to help you turn that bow hike into a successful bow hunt. So thank you for tuning into the Beau podcast. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey guys, so real quick, I want to talk to you about a couple people, couple different guys that help out, just supporting the podcast. They don't pay me anything, nothing like that, but they help me out and they believe in me, and so they want to give you guys a deal on some of their products. So the first is Mountain Alpha, over there, James and Brian, if you've heard that podcast. We all need an unrelenting appetite for adventure, right? Individuality. We all have a thirst for life. At Mountain Alpha, they're a little more gritty than pretty, so they say. So to help you get the mindset and perform better in the mountains, in your mountains, head over and join the Mountain Alpha family. Move life's odds into your favor. If you go to mountainalpha.com and you want to buy any of their swag, gear, or any of their supplements, any of their products, and use code BOWHIKE, BOWHIKE, you'll get 10% off your order. And there's some pretty sweet stuff over there, so go check them out. If you want more information on their supplements, just reach out to the guys on Instagram or shoot them an email. They'll be happy to tell you all about it. And the other one is my buddy Steve and Dan over at Elevation Fitness Training. If you're looking for a fitness and nutrition program laser focused on bow hunters and what we face in the backcountry, Elevation Fitness Training has been doing that for dozens of people, making them stronger, more balanced, mentally tough, and fully prepared to hunt longer and smarter. Whether at home or in the gym, Elevation Fitness Training can customize your fitness program to fit the resources you have and the schedule you need to keep. So if you go over to elevationfitnesstraining.com and enter the code BOWHIKE10, BOWHIKE 10, you get 10% off your personalized training plan. So that's a pretty smoking deal for them to offer you guys a good deal on training, so certainly check that out. Guys, we are talking with Beau Martonik in this episode from East Meets West Hunt. We go over all kinds of fun stuff in this episode, kind of Beau's career in the outdoor writing, podcasting world, as well as we go over some scouting for mountain bucks, planning a trip out west, whether you live out west or you live back east, just kind of that setup, his gear, the mistakes he's made over the years, and that sort of thing. Guys, if you want to go check out Beau's stuff, head over to eastmeetswesthunt.com, just as it's spelled, eastmeetswesthunt.com. Head over there. He designs and sells some apparel, and it's some pretty sweet stuff. I own a t-shirt from him. It's one of my favorite shirts, my Rut Stash shirt. And go check him out. Let him know I sent you. Go pick up a sweet shirt if you enjoy this podcast. Also check out Beau on Instagram. And thanks for listening, guys. Hope you enjoy this episode. All right, hey guys, we got Beau Martonik on with us this week from East Meets West Hunt. Beau, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, besides my delay.
Yeah, I know. That's my fault there. I lost track of time at work and I was a little late on you.
It's all right. Us small guys are used to being an afterthought. It's no big deal.
Yeah, hey, come on now. No, I felt terrible, but I'm usually not late for anything like that. But I was, and I'm owning up to it. So thanks for calling me out, buddy.
Hey, what are friends for? So yeah. We're bringing Beau on today. Gonna do a little chatting about. He just recently had some success in the freelance writing world, as well as he's been. I won't say successful on hunting trips, but successful on going on hunting trips for the past few years, from Pennsylvania out to Colorado. Is that right?
Yeah, yep. I went to Colorado now 3 times.
Cool, man.
And
So for the people listening on my end, all 40 of them that don't know you, I'm sure some of them do. I'm sure some of them don't. About a little intro on yourself. Tell the guys about yourself here.
yeah, so my name is Beau Martonik. I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm from the north central region, right where the Pennsylvania elk herd is, actually. So I live there. I've grown up there my whole life, moved away for a little bit, and then ended up coming back. But I started off hunting at a really early age. My whole family was extremely into bow hunting specifically, so I grew up around it. Always was shooting a bow from a young age, and as most kids do, I guess, through high school and stuff, sports and stuff took over there for a little bit. But around, I think it was my senior year in high school, I realized that I was way more into hunting than I was sports, and kind of quit everything and just started hunting and went off to college and found a group of friends that like to do the same thing. So I always kind of kept the ball rolling there. And once I got out of college, it was like full tilt back on it again, kind of getting into to bow hunting specifically with my father and some friends. And then next thing you know, it was like, I don't know. I guess it would have been 4 years ago now, which would have been, I'm 27 now for your reference. But 4 years ago, I just got this bug in me to want to go out west, hunting elk. It was, something I never thought about before. I watched, a bunch of shows on TV and stuff, and just saw these big ranches and stuff, and really had no idea that there was all this opportunity to be able to actually make it happen for myself. And I read Cameron Haynes' book, Backcountry Bow Hunting, which got me into wanting to do it, which is kind of a little bit of an extreme book to as far as what I had in my mind to go do that for the first time. And I'm like, man, I'm going out there. I'm going to find the toughest unit to hunt. I'm going to hike hard, do all, the whole bit. And but anyways, it got me, I guess off my ass, so to speak, and did it with my brother and my cousin. Went out west and was unsuccessful on my first 7-day backpack hunt. But it was such a cool experience, and got to see that the mountains were way bigger than I could have ever expected. I
Yeah.
remember getting out, at a rest stop outside of Denver, and walking to that restroom, and I was out of breath because I wasn't used to the elevation, and I'm like, geez, this is gonna be rough, But
Yeah.
so anyways, that was like my first like getting into hunting elk. But my bread and butter has always been in hunting the Appalachian region for mountain bucks. So whitetails in the big woods setting, and we call it mountainous here. And again, until I went to the Rocky Mountains, it's still pretty, I thought it was mountainous, but it's very steep. I'd say just as steep as anywhere in the West, just not as high of mountains, and just, densely forested, as I'm sure you're used to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Western Oregon, man.
Yeah, that's exactly. I've been told that there is some correlations between the two, but as far as the dense cover and everything goes. But yeah, so I grew up doing the whitetail thing, and I've hunted some out of state for whitetails in the Appalachian region, which I've actually done okay at, from in regards to my western hunting, not so well. But so whitetails have kind of been my bread and butter, and the thing that I just love doing. So that's kind of a long-winded background on my kind of hunting career.
Yeah. And when did you get into the other side of it? Because you run a podcast yourself. What are you up to, like 70 something episodes now?
Yeah. As of today, is 71 episodes that I got released, and I started it a year ago. It'll be July 1st. It was a year ago that I started the podcast. So been really, really busy with that. And I called it East Meets West Hunt, all surrounding that first trip I told you about when I went to Colorado. And it was kind of a crazy event for me, and really dove me into a whole nother world of getting into, learning about planning hunts and and the fitness side of things, and always just trying to prepare for, an event. And I realized it was, helping me in a whole lot of aspects of my life. And whenever I would tell people about it, that they would be like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I don't have the money, all this stuff, that I realized that, I didn't have and don't have a lot of money. And I work a full-time job and everything else. I mean, the reason why I was late for this podcast is working my job. I'm like, it's not like, I'm anything special from it, but I learned how to plan the hunt and did it. But I realized the resources out there for the Eastern guy or girl, and Midwestern was a little bit, it wasn't there, as far as there was all the information out there, but to gear it down to the level that you could make it relatable to someone else, it just wasn't there. So I kind of realized a gap in information and started the podcast. But how I got the feedback for it was the first time I came back from Colorado, I wrote a story titled East Meets West, and I wrote it for this publication called the Journal of Mountain Hunting, which I was not a writer, had never did anything with that before. They just had a section called Subscriber Story. So I submitted my article, just basically going through my first elk hunt, and they ended up running that story. And that's when I ran that, and I kind of posted about it a little bit when I was getting that feedback. And I'm like, man, there's a big, misconception on what it takes to do one of these hunts. And from that point, the editor of the Journal of Mountain Hunting, Adam Yonke, who actually has one of the first podcasts I ever listened to called Beyond the Kill, and he reached out to me. He's like, hey, I'd like you to write some more for me from that Eastern perspective. Can you, and I'd worked in an archery shop at the time. He's like, can you give some, gear tips and some things like that? And so I just started doing that more and more, and started really liking the writing aspect. So once I got a few of them underneath my belt, I just started pitching articles, just cold calling and emailing different publications, and started with mostly online stuff. And most of them didn't respond or whatever, but I just kept going at it, and that ended up just kind of snowballing to where I am now. I guess it'd be 2.5 years into the writing gig, and I'm doing a lot more of it. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, with the writing, I've always had a knack for, I mean, like, I guess you would say slacking off in like school and still just like getting 100% grades in like college level English classes, or writing classes, I guess you'd say. But when it comes to, I mean, those, you're given a prompt, right, with situations like that. So when it comes to writing these articles, and especially when you're getting started, you're just winging it, right? I mean, you're sitting down, you're brainstorming, you're thinking like, what do I want to write about, or because it's not always I mean, every guy's going to get tired of reading a story about an elk hunt, right? So it comes down to you coming up with different ideas, wrapped around gear. Or, I mean, you had a great thing to run with the East Meets West thing, but that aside, I'm sure that's obviously the shines wore off that, and you're having to dig a little deeper to come up with topic ideas. So what's your process that you go through to come up with these ideas? Is it suggestions from your hunting buddies, or people message you and want an article on this or that, or is it just kind of you write a bunch of crappy ones and one stands out?
Well, it's funny, like, so sometimes you get, like, say if you're writing for a certain, company or editorial, they'll be like, hey, we're looking for some, information on these topics, blah, blah, blah. Is this something you're interested in? And if it's something I feel I know a little bit about, or could, or, do some research on, or whatever it might be, then that's what I'll write on. But for the most part, it's me kind of just coming up with things off the top of my head. Stuff, I've been thinking about. I'm writing one for Go Hunt right now. That's just, it's about, I titled it, I think it's going to be called Two Camps, basically discussing the different options between, backpack hunting and truck camping, and what's the, especially coming from back here, you might need a lot less in gear investment if you're going to truck camp versus, the thing that everyone wants to do because it's kind of, glorified, which it's, fun to backpack hunt, but it's a lot more from an investment standpoint up front and everything else. So being able to cover that, that's just an idea, or I guess an example of something I would come up with. Try to think of things that aren't, talked about very much, and just kind of put a different twist on it.
Yeah,
And
your own twist. I mean, everybody's got a different creative process. I mean, you listen just art, not even articles for those of you who can't read, but like I mean, podcasts, YouTube videos, whatever. Like, there's generally no two the same, and if there is, it's somebody trying to emulate somebody else, and then eventually that runs out of steam. But
yeah,
so I
no,
guess
I
the same
agree.
same thing kind of goes with podcasts, and I struggle uh, coming up with topics to discuss on podcasts. And like I've recorded a couple that like I didn't have any guests or anything like that, and I've recorded them, and like it's just me rambling. I'm like, man, this sucks. I'm not gonna do anything with this. So it's a struggle for me to come up with new ideas. So that's pretty good to be able to come up with enough new stuff, but it's got to be is the fun wearing out of it from deadlines and stuff like that pressing on you, or is that kind of make it more fun?
Uh, it can be tough. Like that's, yeah, I don't necessarily love that part of it. I mean, it is what it is. It turns to work at some point, but yeah, it can be. I hate when I'm forcing myself to try to write something when I'm not feeling, if you, for lack of better terms, creative with it. Sometimes I could just sit here and I could bang out a 2,000 word article in one night and that's it. Like it's as good as it's gonna get. And there's other times it'll take me a month to do the same thing. And I keep going back and revisit it. And things like it just feels like it doesn't flow. So it's not all rainbows and butterflies when it comes to doing that, but it's helped with me with especially on I was talking about the mountain buck side on whitetails, for me to be able to write and talk about that on podcasts because no one's doing it at all. And there's a lot of people from this area that have always complained. I remember growing up, we can't relate to anything that's on TV or in these magazines. So I'm making things that are relatable, and it's easy for me to write about that stuff because it's what I grew up doing. And I'm not going to sit there and write a Western hunting thing about how to kill an elk because I didn't. So why I'm not going to sit there and lie and say, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I'll show you how to plan the best freaking hunt of your life, but that's about it.
Right,
When
right.
it comes to that.
Yeah, be yourself long enough, and it's it's harder to be somebody else than it is to be yourself. So that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing is true when it comes. I mean, there's like a weird divide. There's like, your cornfield whitetails that get written about and put on TV all the time, and then there's like your big muleys in the desert, and people are shooting at a rim rock and stuff like that. And then there's this weird relatable patch, I guess, between the Pennsylvania or Appalachian mountain bucks and the coastal blacktails, like two things that are just like swept under the rug, and people are like, oh yeah, blacktails, those tiny little things, like nobody cares about them.
Yeah.
So I guess I relate to you on that level. Maybe I actually need to start reading some of your scouting articles. Maybe they're the same.
Yeah. Who knows? I don't know anything about blacktail. So if they do work, if you say that they're relatable, then I guess I'll have to come hunt them.
Well, I mean, I will tell you this: I have rattled in a number of blacktail bucks, so they have that going.
There you go.
They can be
Hey,
a little wild, dude. It can be crazy. Whenever you want to come out, man. We have a 3-bedroom house, and there's 2 of us. So
hey,
yeah, you're
that
welcome.
works.
Come out and hunt these crazy things.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
but
But
yeah,
yeah, I
so
as far as the podcast go, just to go on your point there, as far as like coming up with topics or doing one by yourself, man, I've recorded some that's just me, and I absolutely hate it. 'Cause one, I hate hearing my own voice, and I'm like, it's funny because I'm doing a podcast with it, but I hate that, and it always sounds stupid. But I'll tell you what, just put them out anyways, and I just kind of, I put some out. I'm like, I don't know what the hell that if this people are gonna like this or not, and it works out. I think. I mean, haven't got any like super hateful messages about it. So
Yeah, I think the problem with us too is like you want it to be like there's some top-notch podcasts out there. You hear guys like Cody Rich or uh, like Corey Jacobson and Randy Newberg's new podcast. You hear these like super
yeah,
professional, like perfect squared away podcasts, and then you like listen to yourself while you're editing, and you're like, what the hell am I even doing? Like, I sound ridiculous half the time. What am I even spewing out these words? And then there's these awkward moments where you reach some point and then you kind of laugh about it, and then both you guys are like, yeah, so yeah. And that happens.
yeah.
You're like, should I edit this
Awkward
out?
pause. Yeah.
Should I just run with it? I mean, what do you do?
I hate editing, so I do as little as possible.
Yeah. I the first couple that I did, man, I listened through the entire like hour long and like paused it and wrote down stuff as to what times like weird things were happening so that I can go back and go through them. It took me like 3 or 4 hours to edit a 1 hour podcast. Now I like record it, and as long as I know nothing terribly explicit got thrown out in the middle of it, I'm just like, yep, send.
Yeah. I wish I need to get to the point where I'm doing that, as far as like I'm still listening through them and writing down show notes. But sometimes like, man, I wish I could figure out a way in GarageBand to speed it up like 1.5x or something, just to make it go a little quicker, because it takes me a while to go through one podcast.
I think you can do that. You need to YouTube that, man.
You're probably right. It's just
Yeah, you certainly can. So, what did you go to college for anything like this?
No, I went to college for a degree called safety management, which I'm an environmental and safety engineer by trade.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was wondering what you did for work. So that
Yeah, nothing even close to compared to the podcast or outdoor writing or hunting.
Yeah, same. I work on an ambulance, so I feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where'd you go to school at?
I went to Slippery Rock University. It's literally Slippery Rock University. We have a big freaking rock in the middle of the place that you rub for good luck when you walk by, or you piss on it when you're drunk. But either way, it's that's where I went to college. It's in Western Pennsylvania. So
okay. Local. I was just curious if you went out of state and that's where you decided like I love it out here or whatever out west. So
oh no, I was kind of a homebody until I did my first trip. Like when I say that, like I was cool with my small town and liked it and was okay doing what I did there, and would go on some hunting trips, to Ohio and places like that, but never until I got that bug to randomly do it. And then after that, it was like the floodgates opened. I just wanted to travel and do different things.
Yeah. So staying on the topic of your mountain buck hunting, let's get a little bit into the process that you go through. So, excuse me, you kind of the process that you're talking about in your articles, and they're in what Peterson's. If people want to pick up the magazine and read them.
Yeah, Peterson's bow hunting. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but it'd be the July issue that's out in June. That I have an article called, I think it's called "Plan or Scouting Mountain Bucks or Big Woods Bucks," something along those lines. It's a story I wrote on kind of breaking down the aerial scouting to boots on the ground to executing a plan on hunting, big woods, unbroken timber deer.
Yeah, so let's kind of run through that a little bit. I mean, what's your strategy for those guys listening? I mean, and honestly, it sounds like it could be a similar strategy for us guys over here on the West Coast. So now you've got my ear.
Okay, all right. So what I typically do, like when I'm looking for an area, a new spot for hunting, big woods whitetails or any really public land whitetails in the east that typically end up being something on its, a big wood setting. There's no like finely groomed food plots and stuff that are on these properties. So I look at, if I'm looking at the whole state from, really high level view, I'm crossing out any areas near cities. I'm trying to stay, ideally at least 2 hours from major cities, but that doesn't always work. So, an hour and a half usually is a good, zone to get in.
What's your reasoning behind that? Are you hunting bigger bucks by being in the big timber, or are you just trying to stay away from people?
People.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not really correlated to the size a whole lot. You do get some older age class in some of the remote areas that can be bigger deer, but for the most part, it's just stay away from people. When I lived in the Pittsburgh area for a little bit and hunted some of the public lands there, I was like, all right, I see where Pennsylvania gets their name for having, the most hunters per square mile. It was it was insane. So yeah, I look for some little bit more remote areas that take a drive that either I'm going to camp, in my truck for a long weekend, or set up camp or rent a cabin or do whatever for a week, during the rut to hunt those areas. Or as I'm lucky to where I live at now in my hometown, I'm close to live in the middle of nowhere, so I'm close to a lot of those places, and I can just stay at home. But so I look for that, first and foremost. And once I kind of have a general region, laid out, I'm just kind of going through and mapping out the roads that access these areas and looking at it and trying to, figure out what in these areas do the Bucks need, and also what's going to divide people from going to these places. That doesn't always mean going back in extremely far or anything else. A lot of times it comes down to that, but for the most part it's things that either just pulling off along the side of the road instead of going to a designated parking area, because I mean, specifically in Pennsylvania, you can pull off anywhere along the road if it's public land there. And I know some places are different, but you can do that, and that helps. And if there's a little bit of a creek or a river there next to the road, that eliminates a lot. I'll bring hip waders with me, and I'll put them on my pack, and I get there and I'll change into them, go across. I'll leave them next to the
Mm-hmm.
creek until I come back at night. And just by doing that, you can go, a quarter mile in the woods and be like you're 3 miles back. It's all relative depending on, what kind of terrain features you have there that breaks it up.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm looking for a lot of times from the scouting, the aerial view, is as far as like big ridges that come out to points where bucks tend to bed out on the points. I'm looking for saddles and draws that are near those areas, and on the ridge tops, a lot of time there's oak trees or logging cuts, things like that are going to offer food sources. And I'm kind of putting all this in the back of my mind, and by using things like Google Earth and Onyx, I'm able to look at that and see the different vegetation features. Like, you get the dark spot over there, which is, some sort of a conifer tree, a hemlock or a pine. And, next to it, you got something that looks like it's really green, which typically means it's oak trees that can be along that edge. I'm like, all right, deer are a creature of edges. They love running edges. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to find those type of things correlated with the terrain. And when I find these things in my head that I'm looking for, that's when I mark those spots. And, then I try to go in either in late fall after the season's over or early spring, and I scout them as much boots on the ground as I possibly can. But when you can't do that and it's just aerial, by literally looking for certain terrain features, like I was talking about, these points, you're looking at, saddles that might create travel from the bottoms of each side or running around the steepness that's below. Those different travel corridors are natural funnels by terrain. And then you overlay that with the vegetation funnels of edges and things along those lines. I'm marking those areas, and I can bet that I go in. Even if I go in blindly, I'll spend as much time as I need to. Even though if I have, say, 5 days to hunt, I'll spend 3 of that scouting if I need to get on hot sign. And that's been kind of my ticket. Seems like a lot of people are, worried about with the whitetail. I'm not sure if it's this way with blacktail too, but worried about blowing them out or getting too aggressive. And with me, it's like I'm not going to hunt deer that's not there. So I just if I blow them out, that means it must have been something there that I need to hunt. And
Right.
and yeah, it's almost reckless to a point, but it tends to work because it just kind of sounds different. But
Yeah. So do you then go like hunt, do you find these areas and then hunt it out of a stand? Like I don't know. I've never been hunting back east, and Like everything you see, people are in tree stands.
Yeah, so I do both. Most of the time I do hunt out of a tree stand, which I carry like a lightweight hang on stand
Mm-hmm.
with some sticks, and I'll carry them on my back while I'm scouting and be able to set up right then, or I'll scout with nothing, if it's not in the season, and then I'll plan on going in and hanging the stand and bringing it down on the same day or night. So that's kind of the most effective way I found to hunt. But I've also still hunted where, since it's so thick you can't glass anywhere. So I'll still hunt too during the rut and things. If I want to check out an area, I'll go slow with the wind in my face, kind of do some calling, grunting, stuff like that off the ground, which can be really effective.
Yeah, we find that to be pretty effective over here. Just like hiking in along a rub line or something and rattling
Yeah,
and bleeding. And that seems to work
yeah.
good. I don't know
I'll,
the male blacktail vocalization, but it seems whitetail are pretty aggressive, right, during the rut period. I mean, do you do a lot of good calling, or is a lot of your good? I mean, it sounds like you hunt more aggressively than the majority of people.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't like to call even. They're like, oh, everyone over calls. And that's, it's kind of the thing with, people with elk or anything else. Some people are really into it, some aren't. And I'm super aggressive calling. When I'm in a tree stand, every 8 to 10 minutes, I'm doing a grunt bleat sequence. If it's the right time of year, I'm not going to do that in September. But if it's, late October, early November, I'm calling a ton because it's so thick. A deer can be past you in 5 minutes and not even know you're there or not even hear your calling. So I try to do as much as possible. Maybe do I spook some here and there? Maybe, but I've killed the majority of my deer by calling, and that seems to be a pretty good tactic. With my dad taught me hunting off the ground, going through some like old logging cuts, like really old 10 to 15-year old, maybe even older, where the trees are big enough that that's super thick and everything. You have to kind of walk the logging roads through it, but not big enough where you can put a tree stand in.
Mm-hmm.
And just going through there, the deer love to bed in there. So just sneaking through and just being super aggressive. I mean, even snapping sticks while I'm grunting and just getting kind of mean with it. And sometimes you'll get these bucks that come out and looking for a fight. And it's just like a human. It all depends on their personality of what you're going to get. You might spook one doing that, or you might get one that just comes in full bore.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of funny how everybody has their different style of hunting, and I think it's all successful because I think you highlighted it right there that deer have personality too. They're not robots, right? So any
Yeah.
deer could be wired just like any human with a fight or flight instinct, and you know,
Yeah.
generally it seems like horns want to come out and take a look, but I don't know why. Um, so
Yeah.
that's
Like, and it's like, that's probably why all the bucks that, not all the bucks, but a lot of the bucks I kill have broken antler tines and stuff. They're used to getting their ass kicked and don't learn from it. But
yeah, they're just like the little guy at the bar. They're just like, yeah, I
yeah.
sniped. Go get after it one more time. So
Yeah. I gotta redeem myself. The doe's looking on.
yeah, instead of just giving up on it. So that's it's a interesting process. It sounds like you have it pretty dialed in, man. Are you one of those guys that every year you just know, like you're 99.9% sure you're going to go kill a buck, or is it still hard enough hunting that even with the knowledge and the experience and past success you have, is it still in the back of your mind that there's a pretty good chance you strike out?
So I go in extremely confident, and I just kind of have that mindset. And that's not saying I'm really good at it, because normally it takes me to the end of the season before I end up killing one. Or like last year, it was first year in like 7 years I didn't kill one in bow season. I struck out completely. Like, just everything seemed to not work like it was supposed to. And I think it was almost me getting a little overconfident, and I laxed on some of my scouting stuff, and I took some shortcuts in places I shouldn't have. And looking, I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but I was so focused on Western hunting and stuff. I'm like, oh, I've done well with this. I'll be fine. And as soon as you start doing that, you start slipping and get kind of caught real quick. And so like I do feel like, because I spend so much time doing it. I've grown up doing it that I have a good chance at filling a tag every year. But it's always, I'm always caught by myself of, getting a little too overconfident with it. But at the same time, I feel like you do need a level of confidence in yourself with it, and that helps, kind of, breed the success with it too.
Yeah. So, sort of staying on that again, what are the similarities and the differences that you've noticed? Obviously, spending a lot of your time as a kid, and I mean, we didn't have the resources we have now. Even, I mean, I'm 24, so I'm a few years behind you, but kind of we're in the same realm of technology progression. So, like, when you were a kid, you didn't have Onyx Maps or Google Earth or anything. So uh, now that you do, what are the similarities between your scouting you do for these mountain bucks that you're doing well killing these things, and then your western hunting? And I know you've been western hunting for elk, so it's a totally different uh, animal that you're scouting for, but you've done a pretty good job at not being from the area, not knowing the area at all, and putting yourself in elk every year. So what do you accredit your success in at least finding animals? Because I bet you talk to 70% of guys that go elk hunting that are just, average guy, and they'll tell you they didn't even see an elk in a unit that there's elk in and you've seen them.
Yeah, so I credit that to uh, a lot of research, podcasts, and the biggest thing, I kind of found a system to how to scout using Google Earth and Onyx. And it was whenever I found Corey Jacobson's online course. It came out the year I started elk hunting, the University of Elk Hunting, and he breaks it down with videos of showing, making it a lot simpler than, that I was making it out to be. They need the food, water, and security, and,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of looking for those pockets. And I'm marking a dozen different areas on a map for a 7-day hunt, knowing, well, that I'm not going to get to all those places. But, when plan A, B, C, D, and E fail, you have plan F ready to go, and you're not scrambling and all those that comes with it. But I've been really lucky with finding elk. Last year it took me 7 days to find them, which was a lot longer than normal. Luckily I was out there for 14, but normally I only get 7 days to hunt. And I've went into, I guess, 2 different units in a few different areas that I've been able to find the elk. So that wasn't the problem, which is a lot of times the biggest hurdle for people, like you said. But for me, it's been the closing the deal side of things, and it's funny because it seems so much different than doing it with whitetails, that I've just really struggled, with doing that, and wish I could have some of those opportunities back, knowing what I do now. But even saying that, still something would probably go wrong or change, and it's I don't know. It's funny. It definitely humbles you trying to hunt them when you're not used to doing it, I guess.
Yeah, you and me both, man. If I could have some opportunities back, right? Like
Yeah.
it seems that way for a lot of people, but I think it's just about, I think that the experience because I mean, scouting is one thing and then experience is something totally different, right? You can get good at one in a pretty short amount of time. Um, and the other,
Hmm.
you just have to be there all the time for however long, right? So I obviously, don't have the experience of a guy that's been hunting elk for 40 years. So we'll get an elk, every day or two that we're out looking for them. But how many times do I get a bull in front of me and, I move the wrong way, or I draw at the wrong time, or, a bull looks over and I realize that I'm in pretty crappy cover, or guy that I'm hunting with is too close behind me and bull spooks on that, or you don't set up a good shooting lane, or you don't do this or that. And so I think it's just everybody can create one opportunity a year, but I think you have to create 10 or 12 to where, that 10% of the time you're going to get a shot. And
Yeah.
then of that 10%, like, are you going to make a good shot? So,
Yeah. No, that's, man, I couldn't be any more true. And actually I was talking to Cody Rich. He was on my podcast that released today, and he said the exact same thing you did, where he's like, how many opportunities you get in the season? I'm like, I don't know, 3 or 4, in that span on a good year, sometimes even a little less. He's like, you need more at bats. He's like, you need to put yourself in situations where you're screwing up more and screwing up faster. The more opportunity you get, you're gonna get, hopefully one you can capitalize on.
Yeah, it's certainly a tricky game.
Yeah, it's really, I guess that's what keeps bringing you back. If you figured it out all the first time, then you'd be one of a kind. That's for sure.
Yeah, so with your scouting, are you looking for the same things, or are you looking? I mean, what are you looking for when you're looking for elk? Because I think we kind of totally skipped over that. But like I said, for a guy, I mean, even I'm not even talking about a guy coming from Pennsylvania or coming from Missouri or anywhere to go hunt elk. I'm talking about even a guy that lives in Oregon and wants to hunt elk in Oregon. Like some people just, I mean, you can literally drive up in the woods and look at elk, right? But like
Yeah.
some, or at least, like, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but like there's areas that I could drive up to almost and walk a quarter mile, and almost every time you go in there, you'll see elk there. And so even for a guy,
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. If this is what you're telling me, give me your PayPal after this. I'll send you some money, whatever I got left in my account, and you send me some waypoints, and we'll go
listen,
through that.
this
But
is
we could
spring
talk
bear
about that
season.
later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I'm not telling you I can kill them or I can get you to kill one. I'm just saying there's places you can almost always go and look at them. And Roosevelts are a totally different animal. I mean, like their behavioral patterns are different. You blow them out of a logging cut, and an hour later they might circle back into that logging cut to be like, "Hey man, who the heck are you?" Like they're curious, they're territorial. Like they don't leave when you spook them. But it is in that thick stuff, so it's hard to get them figured out. But what I'm getting at is there's people that live probably within an hour of these elk, that aren't able to find them. Yet you live, I don't know, 1,000 miles more,
2,000 miles.
2,000 miles away from
Yeah.
these elk, and you're able to get in there and get on them. So what do you think the difference is? Is it time spent in the computer? Is it dumb luck? Is it what?
I think it's a lot of the time spent on the computer and knowing the right things to look for. And like I said, that's coming from me having no knowledge with it. It's just finding those right resources. And also, I use things like Go Hunt and other places to kind of scout out, my units where, this year I'm switching, going to a different state. I'm going to Idaho, and I've done more research on it because before looking back at the unit I first picked in Colorado, the success rate's extremely low. But I've been trying to look at it from the standpoint too that if they give you a tag quota, there's elk there to be found. Because sometimes, I don't know if you get this way, but I stress myself out with where am I going to go to this spot, and I'd spend too much time doing that where I should be, honing in my skills of elk knowledge and where they're living at and those type of things. So I think a lot of it comes down to the pre-planning and having kind of systems in place. So when I go out there, and then having backups to that, because usually your plan A and B aren't going to work out. If they do, that's awesome. That's great. I'll take that any day. But a lot of times it doesn't happen.
Yeah, one thing I struggle with too is no matter how much e-scouting you do, like those pictures could be a year old or they could be 2 years old or whatever. So when you're looking in a creek bottom that's green and everything looks lush and there's water in it, then you show up and you hike a couple miles in there and then it's dry as a bone and you're like seeing elk poop from, like it's fossilized and you don't see an animal on one. There's no rubs or anything. You're like, oh, okay, so that's that whole plan A. You can never put all your eggs in one basket. Or like this year we had a couple times where like good spots that we know like you roll up in there and there's a pickup parked in the road. So I'm like, all right, well we'll leave these guys alone. So you got to go somewhere else, and then you're scrambling just like you said. And when you scramble, you're just throwing a dart somewhere, throwing a dart at the wall,
Yeah.
and hoping it hits where it's going. And generally
You,
it
you
doesn't.
know, Sorry to interrupt you, Royce,
No,
but
you're
like
fine.
when I noticed that last year, it was my third year going to a specific spot, same trailhead, everything. And I found elk in these spots the first 2 years. I spent the first 4 days of my trip, all these spots that were hot spots before, there was no elk because it was dry. It was all dried up.
Mm.
And you could find, like you said, the sign and all the elk poop and everything else that was almost fossilized because it was so old, but all the grasses were dried up and everything else. And I ended up going from hunting elk at around 11,000 feet elevation to a different part of the unit. I got into them, you know into the second week at like 7,500 feet, because in that unit we found the elk. They were lower, but that was all private land. So I had to go to a spot where I could get lower, and there were some more waters and beaver ponds and stuff like that that were, it's completely out of my comfort zone from what I've typically hunted in the first couple of years out there. But just being able to adapt to it and kind of just keep moving, I ended up moving, to a whole nother unit by the end of the trip, where I finally felt like I was getting in the groove of getting at bats, and then I had to go home. But
Yeah.
you know,
It's like the worst ever.
and
You had 7 miserable days and then 7 of the most fun days ever. And then you're like, why does it have to end now?
and the same thing applies to whitetails too. Like I'll have, like, say, a week of my rutcation, my vacations. So I'm like, you go out there and I have these spots that have done well for me in previous years. I go there, and all of a sudden, a week before the season or my time off, they log it. Which will be good down the road, but right now that's not going to be ideal. And if it was in the winter and the deer are craving that food, you might be able to get them coming in eating them tops or whatever. But for the most part, that changes everything you've ever learned about that area. So you got to be able to adapt quickly and have backup plans. And I've been down that road where I wasn't prepared. Like, oh, this is my, especially when I was in like college, and or even after college when I was working different part of the state, I only had a few areas scouted, and really that was what I was going to focus on. And I've been kind of screwed on that, where had people coming in, or they're putting in a new gas well or something that's going on that just throws things off enough that it throws your mind off, that your confidence goes down and everything else. So I've been in that position where, and I absolutely hate it, and I still do this to this day sometimes with whitetails. I'm driving and I'm still not sure where I'm going that morning. I'm
Dude,
like,
that's so
do I
funny
turn
that.
left or do I go straight? What do I do?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It's so funny you said that because sometimes, and exactly the same exact thing, like you got all your money banked on this, and then you find out that your trail camera has now found its way through a freaking mill pond because they fell a tree with it on there or something. So you end up with the unit that you've been scouting, and you got a couple bucks in. Now it's all the timber's cut, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. So or like when I first started hunting up here, really, I put all my eggs in one basket, and I was like taking advice from this guy, taking advice from that guy, and like watching stuff on YouTube and whatever. And I was like, oh man, I got this dialed in. I had this buck on camera like freaking, a bunch of times, once every other day or so, daylight always. And I'm like, oh, this guy's gonna die. I don't know. I didn't know anything about hunting out of a tree, and so I just climbed up in this madrone tree, and I'm up in there, and yet never seen him. And I put all my eggs in that basket, hunted it for like 4 days. Like obviously the wind was wrong, everything was wrong about the setup for the area, and like I set it up in there anyways because I didn't know. But this year even I found myself like one spot that I had seen a good buck in, picked up his sheds for 2 years, and I was like, I know you're in here, you bastard. You cruise through here all the time. We see you. We can't kill you. Like, and what I find myself doing when I miss out on a spot like that is then just like not even just like you're saying driving around. I'll be like in the truck and I'm like, well, maybe we'll go over here. I'm like telling my fiance like, yeah, let's cruise over here and hike into this spot. Let's go hit that spot. We're like halfway there. I'm like, well, I don't know. That spot hasn't really been that hot like the past couple times. So like maybe over here. You end up burning friggin' 3/4 tank of fuel driving around the woods and you never get out of the truck.
Yeah. Or I don't know if you do this too, but like for me, I'll get into a spot and I'll get to a tree. I'm like, that one looks better over there. I walk over there. No. And the next thing you know, I'm a half mile further than I thought I was. And it's, partially through the day. I'm getting late. I'm trying to rush up a tree to get in for to sit the evening. And like, I, as I talk about, like, I have these systems in my head that just work. It doesn't always work that way. For me, even I get in my own head and just, I guess, trying to minimize that the best I can seems to help.
Yeah. So kind of closing her out a little bit here, starting to work towards the end. With your Western hunting, I'm sure what you did, you obviously said you did a ton of research. Animals aside, I'm talking like gear, your setup, your sleeping setup, all that. Sure, you did a ton of research, but without putting words in your mouth or whatever the phrase is, I'm sure things have obviously changed and evolved year to year. And like, just like the rest of us, our crap is good enough and we feel a need to spend a couple $100 right before the season starts every year for something new to just buy another new one of that the next year. But what have you carried over, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot you've learned, but like some big points of what you've carried over that now you're taking into play in the future, like with this year's hunt for your gear and your fitness level and that sort of stuff, like the actual consumables.
Yeah. So, as far as like gear, I learned. Well, I'd never even really did much backpacking. Like I do now because I realized how many awesome areas we've had in Pennsylvania to even do that. But I never did before, so I started from ground zero with lightweight, gear and looking into it, and spent probably too much money my first year. I worked at an archery shop part time for my full time job to fund, my gear addiction to doing too much research. And but like one big takeaway for me was the first year I bought a super lightweight pack. It was the lightest weight one out there. And I'm like, heck yeah, light, light, light. And then I got out there and I broke the bag. I cinched down and I ripped the bag. And my cousin bought the same bag and his main like hip belt buckle snapped on day 3. And like, so I learned that there was kind of a mixture between quality and lightweight and trying to kind of stay in the middle there. And that's something that, I always, if I'm giving advice to people on that is, something like a backpack is something that you can't really skimp out on too much. And same thing with boots, making sure you have boots that fit properly and are well broken into before the season. Boots and pack for me have been the biggest like 2 things. There's other places you can skimp on a little bit. And in addition to that, like layering systems and learning how that all works was huge, I think, as a benefit for comfort and safety from that side of it. And some of the other stuff, I'm always switching things in and out and trying different tents and stuff that I don't need to be doing. But it's like you said, I go into those rabbit holes sometimes. Sounds like yourself, too. And from the fitness side of things, I completely changed like how I worked out and everything since I started doing that. I've always been big into working out, but I was always like into the weightlifting side of things in college. I was big into weightlifting and, this and that, and realized that, yes, that is super important, but the right way of doing it and gearing it towards, hiking with, under heavy loads for long periods of time and short bursts of you hear a bugle and you get a run here and being able to do that stuff. Man, it's still a work in progress, but I've realized that I'll never feel like I'm in too good a shape,
Yeah, I don't know that anybody feels like they're in good. Like I did a podcast with James and Brian Shannon. I don't know if you know Mountain Alpha, those guys, but um, Brian is a beast, like competitive CrossFit athlete, and just he works out. He said he works out like 20 something times a week, so he works out like 3 times a day. But he eats whatever the hell he wants to, like, because he works out so much. He's like, yeah, if I want pizza and beer, I eat pizza and beer, and like he's just an animal. Anyways, and he's like, man, no matter what I do, like the first pull up a mountain, I'm like huffing and puffing at the top and just thinking like, man, I'm not in shape. And then you look at the dude and he's obviously in incredible shape and, works out, like I said, 3 times a day. And no matter what he does, he just feels like he's not in shape. So I think it's kind of always going to be that way. And I know that every year I'm in better shape, but I still feel like garbage. I like,
Yeah.
day 5 or 6, like fatigue, I don't think is that avoidable unless you, I don't know. I mean, you eat good food and take care of yourself and stay hydrated. Like you'll obviously not, what's the word I'm looking for? Diminish maybe?
Yeah. Your body won't, yeah, I'm losing that word too, but like,
We'll go with
almost like a crash,
Yeah. Yeah. You like, day 1, anybody can go up the mountain on day 1 and day 2, right? Like it comes down to, I think a lot of fitness, like the preseason fitness stuff, I think more importantly than actually being in shape, and somebody's probably going to rip me apart for this, but I think what's more important than being in shape is having grit. And so like these guys that, they might not be in the best shape, but they work hard and they go throw on 100 pounds even once a week and go bomb up a mountain and they sweat and they try hard and they get to the top of the mountain. Like, I think that's every bit as important as a guy that runs a marathon every day. Just to have
yeah.
that, like, no, I'm not going to quit attitude and like just that grit to push yourself. Because if you look up at that mountain and you're like, well, I could probably kill a deer down here, like it starts to get to you. So it's just one of my thoughts that I've had lately. And since we're talking about writing, I've thought about writing an article on whether fitness is the determining factor of success, but
Yeah. No, it's funny because like you see people out of shape every year getting it done, and so but they probably have a lot of grit that goes along with that. So for me, I want to be in the best shape I can and be able to have that not quit attitude. Because I'll tell you what, my first hunt, I was not mentally tough to the point is where I thought I was supposed to be. On day like 4, I was like having like little breakdowns like in my own head and just like I was hunting with my brother and my cousin and I'd catch myself snapping at them here and there like if they or like hey, let's go over there. I'm like, do you really think there's elk over there? As soon as you tell yourself that, you're in problem. And now I look at that like if I'm hunting with someone and that's their answer to me, I'm like, well, that's probably not a hunting partner I probably should have picked.
yeah.
And I was that guy, and I'm not gonna, hide from that. It's just, it is what it is. And you do get, if you keep trying at it, you do get better. And I think putting myself in uncomfortable situations, in training and stuff, have helped me with that. And I work out in the mornings before work, so I get up every morning. I go to the gym at 4:30 in the morning, and like tomorrow I'm not going to want to wake up to do that, but by doing that, just little things like that, by still getting up and doing it, add a percentage of mental toughness. I feel like for myself at least, that that you can do it. And last year when I did 14 days of hunting, like that really, those last 4 days were tough. Like I was not eating enough. I was eating the right food, just not enough. And my body was really, my immune system was breaking down. I got super sick. Like, I don't know, it felt like I had the flu. I don't think I did, but like I was just, my throat was swollen shut and I was struggling. And when you're in the backcountry, it seems like so much, and that's a loose term, but like we were back in a ways at camp and it feels so much worse too when you're not in the comforts of your own home. And
you go kick it on the couch and grab a hot coffee or something to feel better. I know what you're saying exactly.
Yeah.
So,
And that was like a huge thing for me is trying to grind it out through those situations. But it makes it, I don't know, each situation you put yourself in like that, I feel like gets you one bump up the next time.
Yeah. Yeah, so we covered a lot of stuff in this podcast, man, from the writing stuff to the Western hunting, the Eastern hunting, how you kind of got your start. To sum it all up, what and I'm going to kind of have to break it up into a couple of spots here, but like for a guy that's, I'm going to say hunting out west for the first time, but what I kind of mean by it is just hunting elk for the first time.
Yeah.
If you could get
Yeah.
me,
For you, if you go any further west, you're going to be in the ocean. So
yeah, yeah, I'm waiting for them to build a bridge to Hawaii so I could hunt over there. Well, I'm just talking. I mean, even guys that live around here that like now born and raised are pretty popular. Maybe it pops up on their YouTube when they're watching shows about Zelda or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, archery, that's cool," and they want to go shoot an elk. Like, what do you tell that guy because you're a guy that you had a longer drive, but you're in the same situation. So, like, what do you
yeah.
tell that guy? Just a couple little pointers here and there. Get somebody started on the right track that's super green at this.
The first thing that I tell people is should just do it, like plan it, like
Mm-hmm.
put it on a calendar and do it. That gives you a level of commitment that you're going to do it. If you say I might do this, you start diving into it, you'll probably get frustrated and overwhelmed and might not do it. So committing to doing it is the first thing, because you're gonna, no matter how much you prepare, the experience is huge with it. So just trying to get yourself, I guess, in the mindset that you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, doing research, but the right research. Don't go through forums and stuff like that. I've been down that rabbit hole, and I still catch myself doing it and saying, why am I doing this? Finding the right resources, whether that's podcasts, things, if you're elk hunting, like I truly think everyone should go through Corey's course, University of Elk Hunting. I don't know if you've checked it out or not, but it lays it out whether you're a beginner or you're advanced from the beginning to end. Like really, really helped me out with the planning process and making it, it's definitely not, a super simple thing to get into learning how to hunt elk, but it gives you a lot of the resources to do that and knowledge to get you started at least. And I think things like that really help you out. And then investing in yourself from a time standpoint to doing that and investing knowledge into the planning. I think the better you can have it planned out, the more successful you have the potential to be, and obviously in my case, it doesn't always work out from it, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I truly enjoy those hunts, and even when they are tough and there's times when I want to go home, like as soon as I'm driving back, I just can't wait to go back again.
Yeah, and with guys getting in, I'm just going to kind of group in the writing with with you, like kind of starting your brand and the podcast and all that. I'm going to group those together because they kind of run hand in hand. If you're into getting into the quote unquote hunting industry, anything that kind of falls into that, I'm going to throw together. So with somebody, and once again, 16 years old or 70 years old, that, long-time hunter, short-time hunter that wants to get into what we're calling the industry now, with whether it be writing or filming or podcasts or anything like that. Is that the same? You're going to tell somebody to just jump in with both feet?
Yeah, but the one thing I would say with that is not the biggest thing I'll tell you is don't be one of those people that just, that you have a few pictures on Instagram and stuff, and then all of a sudden think that you need to hurry up and try to get, quote unquote sponsored or pro staff, or don't do that. Just put out quality stuff, whatever that content is, whether that's a podcast or that's your writing, it's going to suck at first. That's the way it is for all of us. And just keeping it in your mind. It's not a short-term thing. There's no shortcuts, just working towards it. And if you don't quit and you just have it in your mind, you really want to do that and you're doing it for the right reasons, you'll succeed in it. But it definitely takes time. And the other thing I would say is meet as many people as you possibly can, like whether it's going to shows, but just like I said, don't go asking for things. Just meet people, have conversations, have those open connections. You never know down the road when it comes down to, you create a business out of it and you're looking at a business decision. They know you, they've met you before, they've seen you 3 years ago at this show. You walked up to their booth and, said hello. Something small can lead to opportunities. For me, it was working in an archery shop. I got to go to the ATA show, luckily for that. And from a whole different perspective, I just met a ton of people. I started the podcast. I reached out to people to be a guest and stuff when I had nobody, like, to, as far as I couldn't say, oh, I've had this person on before. It was brand new. That they knew me a little bit, and or at least talked to me, and it was a little more easier to get that stuff going. But and the other thing I would say is, whatever you're doing, be authentic with it. And it's talked about a lot, but it's so true. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, 5 tactics kill an elk, because it's not me. I haven't done that. I'm not going to pretend to be that person. I'm going to show that I've really been obsessed with trying to do it and, planning it. And that's why I get people on my podcast that know how to do it and, help myself and everyone else listening. Just being yourself and showing those struggles. Don't be afraid to show the problems that you're having. I had last year where I wounded a buck and that's not easy to talk about. And it's, kind of, you have to suck up your pride a little bit, as much as I practice and think I'm, doing okay with something, it's showing those downfalls because people relate to that a lot more. And even in the industry, the industry is a very small community of people. It seems huge from the outside, but it's such a small community of people, and just being yourself is the easiest way because you'll get found out at some point if you're not, and those people might rise fast, but they fall even harder.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. So anything else you want to close on here, Beau? Otherwise, we can get it wrapped up, get you to bed so you can get up early and hit the gym.
Yeah, it was self-inflicted why we're up late, but but yeah, man, no, I think that covers it. Like I said, if anyone, I'm not trying to sit here and preach or anything, but as far as anyone wants to do anything in the industry, or if they want to hunt elk or whatever, it's gonna take just work and just do it. Just put in the time, and with anything in life, if you want to own, your dream is to own a house. It's not something you're going to do overnight. It takes planning. It takes commitment. It takes a lot of hard work to get there. And I think that applies to everything with hunting. And that would be kind of, I guess, my final words with that. Figure out what you want out of it and, work your ass towards it. And also at the same time, especially if people have families and things like that, make sure that you're splitting up that time accordingly, which is something that I need some work on. Personally, sometimes I get so into work mode and hunting
Yeah.
mode that I need to learn to shut it off sometimes.
Yeah. All right, Beau. Well, thanks for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it. I had a great time recording with you. I'm sure it'll happen again in the near future. So,
Yeah, Royce, like I said, I really appreciate you reaching out and having me come on here. I enjoyed it and hope we get to talk again here pretty soon.
yeah, man. Sounds good. You have a good night.
You too, buddy.
Bye. All right. Well, thanks again for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way you get auto downloads and you know when the next episodes are coming out. If you want to check out Beau, go find him on Instagram, East Meets West podcast, I believe, and Beau Martonik. And like I said, be sure to check out Mountain Alpha. Use code BOWHIKE for 10% off. And check out Elevation Fitness Training. Hit Steven up, see what he could do for you. Use code BOWHIKE10 to get yourself 10% off of your personalized training program. If you guys check the show notes, you'll see anything that you wanted to check back on. Now I'm going through and marking that stuff rather than using it as just a place where you can contact people. So guys, check that out. Be sure to leave a review and preferably 5 stars on whatever podcasting app you use. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.